So, today I wanted to share with you guys a book that I think you all should think about reading, Oestrogen Matters. And it's written by Dr. Avrum Bluming and Carol Tavris, PhD. So, first of all, the book is very well written and researched, and it's a book that I think all of you could easily read. Now, to be honest, it's not going to be a book like you're going to read at the side of the pool while you're on holiday trying to relax, but it's definitely extremely readable. You don't have to be in the medical profession to understand it in any shape or form. It does have some statistics in there, but they're extremely well explained. So, why do I think that you should read it? Well, look, every single day I have women coming to see me who are debating the decision as to whether they should take hormone replacement therapy or menopausal hormone therapy. And unfortunately, hormones still seem to be carrying around that reputation as being linked to cancer, especially breast cancer. And a lot of women are really, really worried about should they take it? Should they not take it? What risks is it going to involve? And women will often recount stories about a friend or family member who's maybe developed breast cancer while they took hormones, and they've made a connection between those two things. I think there are many women who understand that the science and research seems to have evolved and the thinking has changed quite a lot over the last number of years. And they're willing and able, but they want to know the evidence for themselves. And I think this book is such a fantastic starting point because, as I said, it's extremely well researched and written by two incredible people. So first of all, Dr. Avrum Bluming, who is he? Well, he is a gentleman who has a very long and distinguished career. He has worked in both hematology and oncology, and in fact has spent more than 60% of his research time looking into the impact of breast cancer and hormones, etc. So he's a very well-renowned and well thought of clinician. So much so that he was elected to Mastership of the American College of Physicians. And so at this point, there's about 100,000 board certified internists in the USA, and only 500 of them have been given this honor, and Avrum is one of them. So he's certainly held in very high esteem. The other co-author is Carol Tavris. Now, she has a PhD in social psychology and is an absolutely renowned writer and researcher, and someone who loves to look at research and look at it skeptically and pull it apart and try and understand what we should really be taking from research. So again, someone who's held in very, very high esteem by her colleagues. The first chapter of Oestrogen Matters is really interesting and well titled, I think. The introduction is called Who Killed HRT? And definitely seems to be what happened about 20 years ago. Certainly I know as a young doctor, we went from prescribing hormone replacement therapy a lot to suddenly, based in the UK, we certainly were not really allowed to prescribe it at all, and we were encouraged to take everyone off it. Now, interestingly, the book answers questions such as, does estrogen cause breast cancer? Which is one of the commonest questions I get asked. It asks questions like, does HRT really change people's quality of life? And it presents a lot of data regarding this. It also gives a full chapter into, can breast cancer survivors take estrogen? And that again is another very nuanced question and answer. But I really would encourage you to read the book and then draw your own conclusions. One of the really interesting things that they bring out in the introduction is a statistic that is often repeated. And I have to admit, as a doctor, I've repeated this statistic frequently myself, which is that depending on the country you live in, that 1 woman in 8 or sometimes 7 or 12 to 14% of the population will develop breast cancer at some point in their life. So that sounds like a pretty scary statistic. It sounds like it's a very, very common disease, which of course it is. But what I want you to understand is one of the things that this book does really, really well is to help you understand what does that actually mean. So, for example, if you are a 30-year-old woman listening to this, then actually in the next decade, you actually have a 1 in 227 chance of developing breast cancer. So that's a 0.4% risk. I'm going to read these from the book. In fact, and if you're a 40-year-old woman, in the next decade, your risk is actually 1 in 68, which is 1.5%. So not 1 in 8. If you're a 50-year-old, then your decade risk is about 1 in 42. And if you're a 60-year-old listening to this, then your decade risk of developing cancer of the breast in the next 10 years is 1 in 28. And if you're a woman over 70, you've got the highest risk of developing breast cancer, and that's 1 in 26. So how have we got to this 1 in 8 number? So I'm not saying that the 1 in 8 number isn't true. It's just about how statistics are being shown. And basically they came to the 1 in 8 by adding together all the other risks and coming up with that as a lifetime risk. So that's why it's really important that we take a step back and don't maybe take things just quite as literally as at this moment in time, your breast cancer risk is 1 in 7 or 1 in 8, because that's actually simply not true. So I think the other really interesting point that I'd like to make at this stage is, isn't it interesting that the highest risk group are in their 70s? And if you think about a woman in her 70s today who has unfortunately been exposed to the old thinking that meant that women weren't offered HRT, then this means that the average 70-year-old has not had hormones since her menopause. So she has been sort of having basically literally no estrogen in her body for about 20 years. And yet she has the highest risk of having breast cancer. Now, wouldn't it seem a little bit strange that our highest risk group are the group of women who haven't had any hormones for more than 20 years? And that's probably a question that doctors, including myself, should have been asking ourselves a little bit more than rather blindly going down a route and thinking that HRT is the cause of breast cancer, no one should have it. So that's just one little point that I want you to think about. As I always say to my patients, I am definitely not here to tell everyone they should take hormone replacement therapy. It is absolutely a very, very personal decision. But what I am here for is to give everyone as much up-to-date information as I possibly can. And I do believe that reading this book is very, very helpful. I also want to read another quote from the book for you. And it's from Bernadine Healy. And it's a quote from quite a long time ago, but I think it's very apt. And she said, "A decision not to consider hormone replacement is a health decision, too, just as is the decision not to take a flu shot or get a hepatitis vaccination. As I see it, women have a competitive health and survival edge before menopause. Women during their childbearing years are protected against many problems that affect men. I see no reason to relinquish that advantage after menopause, not if I can help it." What Bernadine is alluding to there is the fact that as women up to the premenopause, we actually have a lot of health advantages over men. We have a lot less heart disease. We actually have less autoimmune disease, but then that all changes and we start to develop more and more health problems after the menopause. And so what Bernadine is saying is, do we really want to give up our health advantage? So, can breast cancer survivors take estrogen? So, to quote the book, the belief that estrogen causes breast cancer is logical, widely accepted, and wrong. This book devotes an entire chapter to explaining why it's a very nuanced decision. And what I think is really interesting is if you actually understand the history of Dr. Avrum Bluming, his own wife had breast cancer and also his daughter. So he's not talking at this as someone who doesn't have skin in the game. But the book devotes a whole chapter. And again, I do think this is a very nuanced discussion. And I also want to add, I'm not suggesting that everyone with breast cancer runs out and gets menopausal hormone therapy. However, I do think it should be a discussion that someone is entitled to have. And I've had patients who have decided, despite having a past history of breast cancer, that for various reasons, whether it's because of the severe depression they have or their inability to sleep at all, or their very severe quality of life reduction, they have opted to take HRT. And we've done that in collaboration with their doctors. The book also spends at least a chapter talking in depth about the WHI study. So the Women's Health Initiative, which was published in 2002 and was funded by the National Institute of Health to the tune of $1 billion. And the book basically argues that some of the findings and reporting just simply can't be trusted, and explains why a number of the findings were really out of keeping with all the other research at the time. This study has meant that a lot of women and a lot of doctors have not prescribed or been given hormones. And I think it is really imperative that any doctor or any medical profession who looks after women should read this book, because it's a really good synopsis of all of the evidence rather than just looking at one study. The book also covers other really important topics such as estrogen and the connection with heart health. It also has a full chapter aptly named Losing and Using Our Minds. And I have to say that it is one of the commonest things that women come to see me with. They'll say, my brain's not working, I can't remember anyone's name, I'm losing my train of thought, I just can't concentrate, I used to love reading, now I can't, which is obviously ironic when I'm trying to talk you into reading a book, but you know what I mean. But basically, again, it talks in depth about why estrogen may have a potential connection with dementia. And interestingly, in the US, another incredible researcher has just been given $50 million US dollars to research that topic further. So it's not your imagination. Your perimenopause and menopause definitely does affect your brain. We don't know to what extent. It's definitely something that we need to research a lot more. But there's a whole chapter, and I think I personally found it quite reassuring reading the book and knowing that it wasn't just me. There's another chapter dedicated to estrogen and heart health and all the evidence and why we believe that estrogen is beneficial and what happens to women's heart disease risk as they get older. So, in conclusion, I think this book is a must read for anyone who works with women, who prescribes for women, and for any woman trying to navigate the decision as to whether they should take hormone replacement therapy. Whether you've got a family history of breast cancer, whether you've personally had breast cancer, whether you're worried about any other potential health risks or any myths that you have heard about hormones, I think this book is so well referenced. Every single chapter has, there is probably a good quarter of the book is just the references that have been cross-referenced to give all the information and the conclusions to this book. So I think it's a really, really good synopsis for anyone, whether you're professional or whether you're a lay person. I think this book is going to really help you make a decision as to whether hormones are the right thing for you. And you know what? This decision is entirely yours to make. And I want you to have the most up-to-date and best possible information without having to try and troll through medical journals yourself. The reality is that for every bit of information out there, there is still lots of misinformation. And I think that you won't go wrong if you read this book. So I've linked the details for the book in the show notes below. I'd also love you to comment below any books that you've found helpful navigating this journey, and I can explore them and perhaps talk about them on the podcast too. On Sunday morning, when I was out walking at Terrigal Beach, which is a local beach, I kept crossing paths with a number of women who all had vests on, just like me, weighted vests. And we all gave each other a bit of a knowing look because these have become very, very popular in peri and postmenopausal women. You might not know what rucking is, but basically what it is walking with either a weighted vest or a weighted rucksack. I personally opt for the weighted vest because I find it very, very comfortable and very, very quick to put on. So for peri and postmenopausal women, there are definitely a number of health benefits that you can gain from walking with extra weight. One of the health concerns that many women have at this stage of life is developing heart disease. And unfortunately, we know in the postmenopause, the rates of heart disease for women really start to accelerate. So why might rucking or walking with weight change that? Well, basically, whenever you're walking with additional weight, it increases your heart rate more, and it basically makes your heart exercise a little bit harder. So hopefully making your heart a lot more healthy. So that's one of the benefits of rucking in comparison to standard walking. So if you're intrigued and ready to start rucking, my recommendation would be that you start low and go slow. So start by choosing a weight that is 5 to 10% of your body weight at maximum, and take it slowly. Go for maybe a 10 to 20 minute walk at first. Don't decide to go on a 5-hour hike the first time you strap on your weighted vest. So we've been chatting to our friends at RUKSAK, and I've got a special discount code for you. So if you go to their website, which is www.ruksak.com, so RUKSAK.com, and use the code Shauna15, so that's SHAUNA 15, you're going to get a 15% discount. So whether you decide to go for a vest or whether you decide to go for one of their backpacks, either way, you're going to get 15% off.
This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.